Fred Melamed, and welcome to Game Changers with Vicki Abelson.
You did that so well on one take. Perfection.
It was live, I didn't have any choice, right?
Well, is that ever an issue? Like, okay, so you've worked for a lot of directors. Are you a one-take kind of guy, or?
Frequently not.
Yeah, because there's lines and things that you have to know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And how's the memory? Like, it terrifies me, the thought of trying to memorize something. How is that these days?
I don't find memorizing lines difficult. I find remembering people's names difficult.
You know, I've been told...
Including people that I've known for 30 and 40 years.
Okay, so I've been told that's an Ashkenazi Jewish thing, that we have this thing that we don't remember names.
Now, when you say we, are you using the royal we?
Okay, so are you not an Ashkenazi Jew?
Do I look Jewish?
Yes! No, you're not Jewish? Yes, of course you are.
All right, I did it. Yes, I am. Okay. I'm actually Sephardic, but
are you Sephardic?
On one side.
Okay, because I've literally been told that Ashkenazi Jews, I use that as my excuse why I can't remember anybody's name that I've known for a million years.
Well, I was an Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jew when I was 30, and I could remember people's names pretty well.
I know, me too. I use coconut oil every day in my coffee trying to combat the memory thing. So, okay, so Fred, yesterday I watched...
A Serious Man?
I watched A Serious Man. I watched your star turn to Serious Man. Oh my God, what a part you played!
Thank you.
My empathy. What's his name? The lead actor.
Michael Stuhlbarg? Larry, the character.
Larry. My empathy for him in that film. He rips your guts out because everything happens against this guy, especially you. But you get your just comeuppance, but I don't want to give too big a spoiler.
Well, he's my dear friend.
Is he?
Yes,
yeah.
Stuhlbarg, and a wonderful actor, as I'm sure you
Excellent.
know. But he does take it very hard in that movie. There are people who think that his fecklessness, the fact that he can't stand up for himself, makes him, I don't want to say deserve it, but makes him a target for the kind of, target's not fair, but makes him somewhat culpable. The fact that he can't really stand up for himself makes him somewhat party to all of the misfortunes that occur.
And what do you think about that? Do you think that's so?
Well, here's what I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's human nature to want to believe that there's a code that we could follow. If only we were good, if only we didn't hurt other people, if only we were unselfish, if only we kept our promises, that no shitty thing would befall us, that no misfortune, we wouldn't get cancer, we wouldn't get hit by cars, we wouldn't grow old, we wouldn't get divorced. It's not the way life is.
It's not the way life is.
But there's something deep within us, it may have to do with our childhoods, it may have to do with something else, that wants to believe, desperately wants to believe, that we would be protected from life's ugly, painful events if we were only good enough.
I think that's totally true. Mm-hmm.
So I think Larry's problem in that movie, of course that's a movie about a man and religion, and that the doctrine that you act a certain way to receive a kind of protection or a kind of blessing is deep in many people's understanding of or suspicions about religion. People have been trying to make deals with God for a long
Please
time.
explain the beginning to me, because I was multitasking at the very beginning when the Dybbuk is there. What is that about? What is going on there? What are we supposed to take from that?
I can only tell you my guess. I don't know, and it's no better than anybody else's.
The Coen
guess.
Brothers never explained. This is a Coen Brothers movie for those of you who, if you haven't seen it.
No,
if you haven't seen A Serious Man, it's on Netflix. It is phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
That's kind of
and
I appreciate
and your
that.
performance is amazing. And as many have written, should have been an Academy Award turn for you. But anyway, we'll talk about that. So what is that beginning about?
Well, I mean, I think it's about the thing that we were just talking about.
Okay.
I think it's about, well, okay. People haven't seen the movie, so I don't want to spoil it for them. But think of what comes on the screen right after you see that whole beginning. It says, "Accept with simplicity." A quote from the Rambam, I think, or Rashi. I can't remember. It's Rambam. It says, "Accept with simplicity everything that happens to you."
Accept with simplicity everything that happens to you.
In other words, the bad things and the good things. They're not indicative of your merit or of your failings.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. So your blessings are not indicative of your merit.
Well, I think in the larger sense that's true. I mean, I think that's part of the message. If the movie could be said to have a message, I mean, I hate to think of any work of art as being so reductive as to have a message you could put in your pocket and take home.
I don't think anybody sits down to write a piece of art and says, "I want to make this point." Does anybody do that?
I think people do, but I think their artwork shows it, right?
Yes.
I think the Coen Brothers, who are often accused of being sadistically unconcerned for the plight of their other characters,
viewer?
observe about life correctly that we all would like to believe that if we toe the line, all would be well. But we see it in our own lives and in the history of everything else that it's just not that way. That isn't to say that it isn't worth it to be the best Vicki Abelson or Fred Melamed that you can, because you do accrue a great deal of happiness and good fortune by doing that. But it doesn't protect you from horrible things that still happen. You know, in the 12-step programs, which I know about, and other people I'm sure know about too, some people, you know, and by the way, we'll talk about this, but people have adapted all kinds of sayings and mottos and things that they co-opted that have nothing to do with what's really in the books. They just adapted them.
Such as
God never gives you anything that you can't handle. Yeah. Complete bullshit. I mean, tell that to people who are in Auschwitz.
Yeah,
or somebody whose child has cancer, or somebody who has a child with autism, or somebody whose husband drops dead on the golf course, or anything that happened. I mean, they don't have to be great tragedies to make you know that life has within it things that are terrifyingly unpredictable, and even things that are predictable that are pretty tough, right? So, what is the function of art in all this? I mean, I hate to be so professorial.
No, this is important, relevant.
Yeah, so it's to make you think, well, what is life actually like? What is the truth about life?
Wow, we're getting to some heavy shit right off the bat today. What is the truth? Fred, what is the truth about life? Oh, see, we came to find out the truth about life. Fred's going to tell us the truth about life.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I could tell you my life.
Okay.
Like, it's worth it. It's worth it to keep your word. It's worth it to try and be a good man or woman if you can. It's definitely worth it. There's much to be said for it. But the rules are that there aren't too many rules.
Okay, I believe that's true, and I think things happen to people that they don't deserve to. I mean, I also
on both ends.
I also believe in karma, and I believe that things carry over from one life to the next. So what might be inexplicable in this life, I believe in reincarnation and all of that.
I think even in your own life there's karma.
I agree. So what I'm saying, like, I did a couple things that were bad behavior at once upon a time, because I am a person in recovery and wasn't always this person that I have strived to become. And I did some bad behavior, and I, in 1 week, got bit by a dog and got rear-ended twice. And I believe that I was just delivered, my karma was delivered unto me in no uncertain terms immediately.
Are you at liberty?
No, I'm not. I'm not going to tell you what I did. I'm not going to tell you what I did.
I'm wondering if the punishment fit the crime.
No, kind of, I don't know, but I mean, I could have been a better person. I mean, I didn't kill anybody, but, you know, did I deserve to get bit by a dog? It wasn't rabid, at least, and I got rear-ended twice, and it all happened within days. And I have found, Fred, that when I do the right thing, when I am in grace and I am consciously aware of trying to be of service and be my best self, pretty good things happen. Like, things are okay. And it doesn't mean everything is wonderful, but I do find that when I act out, I'm karmically delivered payment almost immediately, always.
I mean, I have a slightly different take on that.
Okay, let's hear.
Well, for one thing, just to deal with the three things, I'm sure you know the Shakespeare quote, I'm sure you've heard it. When sorrows come, they come not in single spies, but in battalions. That's just true.
Yeah.
Shakespeare, like the Coen Brothers, told it like it was
Yes.
and is. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that you influence reality in such a way that it bites you back in the ass or bites your hand. Maybe, I don't know. But
I did get bit almost on the ass. It was on the thigh, actually.
that dog knew whose thigh to grab.
That's right.
But I do think that if you keep your word, if you try and live honorably, to use a corny expression, if you try and be a good person, that sounds so weak.
It sounds so trite, but it's the truth.
But I think what happens is you're better prepared to deal with the things that frighten, weaken, hurt in life. It builds up your idea of who you are and makes you. It has a
fortifying effect.
A fortifying, constructive effect on you as a human being, and it makes people regard you differently, regard you with trust, regard you with esteem, and you esteem yourself. I mean, this is all, kind of textbook, kind of self-help stuff, but actually it's all true.
I think so.
So, like people talk about prayer if from my point of view, now it may be silly to try and make rational thought about prayer, but here's the way I look at it. I don't believe, as the Catholics say, that you can petition the Lord with prayer. I believe that if God is really God, God would know your prayers before you prayed them. And does it mean that it's your volition that's the signal to God? To me, I think it's not God that changes, but you that change as a result of prayer.
I think there's a lot of that's very powerful. I've never thought of it that way, but I agree with that. But I also believe that there is a divine power. There is a greater grace than my grace.
I do too.
Right. So
I do too, but I'm not sure it's or his or her method of doing things is to listen to the pleading exhortations of humanity to decide what to do.
Okay, I like that. I've also found, though, that when I humble myself enough to ask for help, it usually arrives. But that when I am being willful and deciding that I am going to do it my way, I'm going to do what I want, all right, that
no question.
I walk into walls.
No question.
But as soon as I humble myself...
Right, but is that because... Here's the thing. It's hard to say. All I can say is I know that you're right. Experientially, I know you're right. If that's because the act of humbling myself changed me, or it's because who knows?
Changed me.
Yeah, of course.
But sometimes it changes the external circumstance.
Sure.
Oftentimes.
Yeah.
So that's the part that's interesting. Things that I have no control over. It's interesting. And while we're talking about this, I mentioned before we went on the air that I wanted to bring up your post on Facebook, which that really affected me the other day. Happy Chanukah to those of you who are celebrating. Happy Chanukah to you,
and
Fred.
to everyone, everybody everywhere.
Everybody everywhere. And so I'm looking at your menorah, but it doesn't have candles in it. Did you already burn them tonight?
We did. We
Okay.
had a little thing with our kids. We gave them presents, and for some reason, you know how Jews argue about everything? There's no standard size for candles and menorahs. I couldn't find ones. My wife couldn't find ones that fit into that. She could only get like birthday candles that were like too small.
Oh.
So you had to hold them or melt the wax in there. Anyway.
Bed Bath & Beyond is very good about having different size candles, I found, by the way.
Good to
That's
know.
a good place to go. But anyway, you had this post on Facebook where you were likening... you tell it rather than me try to paraphrase it.
Well, what I was saying was, it's good to remember that Hanukkah is actually a holiday of resistance. It marks the time when our ancestors resisted the growing move towards Hellenism. And by the way, I don't mean the brilliance of Aristotle, and other Greeks who were responsible for inventing democracy. This is political Hellenism.
Okay.
So the Greeks were taking over all of what we think of as the classical world and running it. The Jews in the temple or the temple had been destroyed, banded together to resist Hellenism, to resist not only their religion, but their culture being completely taken over, and their idea of right and wrong being taken over. So the point that I was trying to make was just that this is a holiday.
Can you tell the miracle of Hanukkah, just for people that might not know what it is, why?
Yeah, so the menorah...
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's fine. I mean, I'll give you like...
The footnote, what is it called? What are those? The Cliff Note version.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the Cliff Note version. I'll give you the Maxwell House Coffee Haggadah.
There you go. I have one of those.
Right. So there was a temple. Now originally, now there's temples all over Southern California, but in those days, there was only one temple, okay, which is in Jerusalem. So the temple had within it light to burn, which was symbolic of our faith, symbolic of our everlasting faith. The light is never supposed to go out because it represents our faith, which never dies. Okay. And
what do they call that? That's called something. The eternal flame? Is that the eternal flame?
I think that's the thing that's on President Kennedy's.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Okay, wrong.
I'm not sure.
Ever-present light. Never mind.
I don't know. I was never bar mitzvah. I don't know any of that stuff.
Oh, real?
No.
Okay, we'll talk about that too. Yeah.
So anyway, there was this oil light that was supposed to stay lit all the time. The temple was surrounded by soldiers who had destroyed much of Jerusalem, much of Jewish Jerusalem. There was only enough oil to supposedly for one night to burn. Miraculously, somehow, this little amount of oil burned for 7 nights. So, which is symbolic of that our faith and our culture survived and has survived. The Jewish people and the land of Judea has been, like many other parts of the world, has been taken over by invading forces countless times. In spite of that, in spite of the diaspora that we all went all over the world, including to California.
A lot in New York. A lot landed in New York.
All over.
Yeah.
Somehow, the religion has kept together.
Now, why are there 8? Why are there 8? Why do we celebrate for 8 days? If there were 7, if the flame did for 7 days.
Maybe it's 8.
I'm thinking it's got to be 8 because there's 8 things on the thing.
Yeah, no, you're
I'm thinking
right.
it's 8. Somebody said to me 7 last night too. I said, no, it's 8.
I only look like a rabbi. I'm not.
You weren't even bar mitzvah. Who am I asking this for? So if we're comparing the resistance of the Jews back then and what your point was.
My point was that in many generations, the resistance of evil, the resistance of forces that wish to bring culture down, that wish to attack what we avow as decent, is in the interest of progress of humanity. There are forces like that occur throughout history again and again and again. And sometimes it's necessary for us to resist those forces, not only to resist them from ugly examples that may exist in our world today, but also those forces that exist within ourselves. Everybody has the seductive potential to be swayed by selfishness, by desire to have one's own ends, met.
But that doesn't make us like the idiot in chief who is in the process of his selfishness and craziness destroying lives of all kinds of people. That's a different kind of evil for me.
Well, I'm not exactly sure who you're referring to, but if it...
The idiot in chief? I can't call him by the term that we call people in that position of power because to me there is nothing presidential about him.
Let me tell you something. As you, I'm from New York.
Yes.
Where he was well known and understood for long before any of this national stuff happened. And he is so roundly hated in New York, and it's such a laughingstock to most people in New York, that the whole idea that he would even run seemed ludicrous to me. And I remember joking to my friend, I hope the American people are not going to get confused by this Kennedy-esque level of charisma that this man has. Any 8-year-old...
Come on, don't compare him to Kennedy. Kennedy was fantastic.
This guy, any 8-year-old who's been watching television
knows he's an idiot.
can see from a mile away.
Yeah.
This is not some Machiavellian genius. This guy looks like what he is. You don't have to be, and doesn't try and disguise it very much in what he says. I mean, that would be different. What's so disheartening, what's so shocking, what's so painful to me and you and probably a lot of other people is he doesn't hide what he is.
And he gets away with it.
And yet people, by the score, love him and believe in him.
Come on, do people really love him?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
They love money. I think anybody who is behind him sees one thing, and that's money.
The strange and painful irony is that many of the very people who need progressive movements to help them.
This is true.
Have been sold this insane idea that unionism is wrong, that sharing wealth is wrong, that public assistance is wrong. It's
amazing how many people.
Unbelievable.
It is amazing.
The only good explanation I've ever heard is a quote from somebody, I can't remember who said that the problem with the American people not placing blame where it belongs, which is in the class of robber barons who continue to enrich themselves, is because the American people think of themselves not as an underclass, but as a temporarily embarrassed set of future millionaires. And even though that's a joke, I don't think it's entirely a joke. I think people,
think about that.
I think people have given up on the idea that you can actually improve your lot through education, hard work. I mean,
no, that's
people.
really sad. Yeah.
And instead, they're doing something like the equivalent of playing the lottery. Somehow I'm going to be rich. Somehow I'm going to win. Somehow I'm not going to be a schmuck anymore. And then Donald Trump looks like, yeah, that guy is rich and he gets a lot of pussy. And people listen to him and they respect him. He doesn't take any bullshit. And he calls a spade, to use a horrible, unfortunate, example. I cannot, there's no other rational reason I can understand except that people believe that politics is evil and bad. I remember Obama saying, well, let me ask you something. If you needed heart surgery, you found out you needed a bypass, do you want a guy who's done 150 bypasses, or do you want, or 200 or 1,000, or a guy says, wait a second, you guys are doing bypasses all wrong. I know how to do bypasses. Let me show you the way they ought to be done. In other words, you understand what I mean by that. It's the same like somebody says, oh, people who do this operation, we shouldn't listen to them. They're corrupt. I have a new idea. You want a guy flying your plane? You want the guy that's made 10,000 trips? You want a guy that says, wait a second, you guys are flying the plane all wrong. You're pilots. You're in the swamp. Let me show you how to fly a plane. That's who Donald Trump is.
But why is anybody listening to him? And why does nothing stick? Why does he get away with everything?
Well, because no matter what, and Charles Blow wrote a great article about this, very depressing but very wise article in the paper the other day, saying even if it turns out,
the newspaper is something that people used to hold in their hand and read.
It's great for hitting bugs. You can't do that with an iPad.
You can't.
Right? What he was saying was, even if it turns out that the Mueller investigation or somebody else proves that Trump was responsible for absolute collusion, I mean, personally responsible, his base will not desert him because they don't care. They don't care.
Yeah.
In spite of the fact that that's a treasonable, hangable offense in American law, they don't care. What they care about is he doesn't take any shit from anybody. That's why they think he's. I'm not meaning. He doesn't bother to use words that have to send anybody to the dictionary. He doesn't care about that.
Well, he doesn't know what those words are.
Well, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But he doesn't care that he doesn't know what they are.
No, he does not.
He when he refers to himself as being of high intelligence, it's like when you pass a restaurant on the street that says quality food shop.
Best coffee.
Quality
Best
restaurant.
cup of coffee, yeah.
There's something smelly about it inherently. But I think people a certain class of people are so completely, feel so completely left behind by all the progress of recent years. Listen.
So wait, so how
let me say,
how do we, okay, finish your thought and then
I was a child.
Okay.
And I guess when you were a child, although I'm probably quite a bit older than you.
No, I'm 63. I'm older than you.
Well, I don't wish I looked like you, but I wish I looked as good as you.
Thank you.
Anyway, Okay. So when I was a kid, and when you were a kid, if you were a union auto worker, for example, or you worked in a public school, you could be a one working person family. You could have
you
You could have a nice. I don't mean anything,
middle class. You could be middle class.
live quite comfortably on one income. You could have 2 cars. My mother never worked until my father lost his job. We had a house on Fire Island. We had a very nice apartment.
Okay, what did your father do?
He was a television producer.
Okay, so now that's not a normal job.
No, but
And I saw some of the shows that your father produced, and he
never made more than $30,000 in his life. But $30,000 in those days was pretty
a lot
good.
of money. Yeah.
Right, okay. But you could, on the salary that one person made as an auto worker, for example, live pretty well. Pretty well. You could surely have 2 cars. You could go out to eat. You could go to movies.
You could have 2 cars?
Yes. You could. I mean, they weren't necessarily new cars. They weren't necessarily fancy cars.
Okay.
You could live okay. Nowadays, even if you have 2 people working, and you're working in those same kinds of industries that don't require too much education, if you're a factory worker, if you work in the clothing, well, hardly anybody in America works in the clothing business. You have to be in India or
Right.
Anyway, those industries we used to have here, building televisions, clothing, all gone. So if you're a humbly educated person, a person without a great deal of education, you're struggling to survive.
I'm sorry, but every overeducated person I know, myself included, is struggling to survive.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. But what I meant is,
that I'm so
if
smart,
your particular education didn't happen to be one that's a track towards employment,
right?
If whatever.
Which now, what does that even mean anymore?
Well, when I was young, and when you were young, if you had a bachelor's degree, you were relatively assured of being employable. You didn't necessarily.
Our parents, not us.
No, we were kids.
Right.
Our parents' generation.
Right, our parents' generation.
Yeah, if
Correct.
you had a college degree,
right.
Somewhere in the working world, you could find a job that was a pretty good job.
Even if you didn't have a college degree, people could find jobs. People had jobs.
Yes.
People had jobs. People worked. Everybody, all of my friends, I don't remember any of my friends having parents who were unemployed when I was a kid.
So the reason that's important is, for quite a while now, that has not been true.
It has not been true.
And there's a lot of people, especially who live in parts of the country where there used to be plentiful jobs in industries that are no longer supported, that are now out of luck. And it's bad. And they see other people getting what they think of as public assistance other than them. And that makes them angry. And they feel a kind of anger and a kind of hopelessness about it. And they blame, instead of blaming the people who are actually to blame, who are all the really moneyed people, the big moneyed people who have moved industries out of the United States in order to make more money, they blame unions. The very people set up to help them. So that is my verbose answer as to why.
Well, that's
like
good and
Donald
important,
Trump.
and I could talk about. I could keep going on with this, but we have to talk about Fred. So we have to talk about Fred because that's why we're here. So, but this is fascinating conversation. So Fred, New Yorker, born in New York.
Born in New York. Born in Queens, 1956.
Where in Queens?
Jackson Heights.
Okay, so I went to Newtown.
Well, I did not stay there. I was adopted.
Okay.
And my mother, I was born in what used to be called Doctor's Hospital in Jackson Heights, but I was adopted when I was 2 days old.
Oh.
Very young. And my parents lived in Manhattan, and I was raised in Manhattan.
And you went to Smarty Pants School.
Hunter?
Yes, Hunter is a Smarty Pants School.
I went to, I showed them. Believe me. Test well, that was the end of it.
Okay, so now what was the first thing you wanted to be when you grew up?
For a long
Wait, you're in a show business family because your father's a producer.
My dad was a TV producer.
And I know about Bilko. What else did your dad?
He worked with a guy called Nat Hiken, who was kind of a pioneer in early television. He had a show called Car 54, Where Are You?
Oh, God, I love Car 54.
That was my dad's show. Right.
Oh, God.
Tootie and Muldoon.
What else?
He worked on a show called Let's Pretend.
Okay,
Kid show.
all right. I want to give a shout out to Drew Nieporent. His mother is Sybil Trent.
Sybil Trent was a casting director, lovely woman, passed away some years ago, but absolutely lovely woman, good friends with my dad.
And Drew is one of my very best friends, and he had surgery last week. I spoke to him yesterday, and his mom is Sybil Trent.
Hope you're feeling good, Drew. I haven't been to any of your restaurants in a long time because I live here, but I don't know if he has restaurants here, but
he doesn't have restaurants here. He has all.
Back in New York, they were great. And
Nobu, Montrachet. Well, Montrachet's not Montrachet anymore. Is it Cortone's? I can never remember what the latest one is. But Tribeca Grill, where he employs my daughter.
Oh, really?
Yes. Samantha High, who we're going to talk about because she wants to follow in your very footsteps of,
mentioning big restaurants.
Mentioning big restaurants. But okay, so hi Drew, I love you. So did Sybil ever send you out?
She hired me many times.
Look at that. Look.
She was wonderful. A very bright, funny, interesting person.
So she started on Let's Pretend, which was your father's show.
Right.
So did she know that when you went? Well, obviously she knew that when you went before her. She knew that your father was her.
Yeah, she knew who my dad was.
Little nepotism never hurt anybody.
it couldn't hurt, like you said.
Couldn't hurt. Right. Okay, so your dad had these shows. So was show business what you?
I wasn't sure that I wanted to do it, but I was surrounded with it. We also had a house in Fire Island all the time since I was born. And my parents had a kind of a crowd, a bunch of friends that they were very tight with.
Were they drinkers? Social drinkers?
Yeah.
But not drunks.
No.
The Jews can't be drunks. That's kind of
the
the rule.
They can be.
Well, I discovered once I got sober that a lot of Jews are drunks, but they hide it really well.
Yeah, my parents liked to drink, but I wouldn't say they were anything near alcoholism. But they were not particularly avid eaters, though. But I always had that, and I was. But as I was adopted, physiologically, I'm not related to them anyway.
Right.
Anyway, so I grew up.
So eating is not a what's the word? An environmental issue, because I have that issue.
Well, it's kind of an environmental issue for everybody. And my sister, who is their biological child, has had some issues around that.
There you go.
Although opposite from mine. Anyway, so we always had a lot of friends in show business. My father had a lot of friends who were actors, directors. One of his closest friends was a very well esteemed announcer called Kenneth Roberts, who's the father of Tony Roberts, the actor.
I saw him in many Woody Allen.
Yeah.
Which we'll get to too.
Yeah, my first experience with Woody was my father took me to see Play It Again, Sam.
Don't even, because my father took me to see Play It Again, Sam. Front row, Tony Robbins, Diane Keaton, Tony Roberts, Woody,
right,
who spit on me the whole thing.
Jerry Lacey playing Humphrey
Bogart.
Right. I remember that.
Yes, I mean I was like 12 or 13.
Yeah, me too.
Age, so
me
yeah.
too. Yeah.
Wow.
So I remember going backstage.
You got to go backstage.
Well, I was good. My father, Tony Roberts and I were friends. Tony Roberts was older than I, but we're close, good friends. And we went backstage, and I got to meet Woody and everything, and then of course,
Is that what sparked you getting roles in 7 Woody Allen movies?
I don't think so.
Because that was so much later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that was just one of those things. When I graduated from drama school, I got out of drama school in 1981, and they have a big audition. They had a big centralized audition when you got out of school.
Oh, Yale had.
You're right, Yale and Carnegie.
He went to Yale Drama, Yale grad school.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. 14 kids in his class. 14, not kids. 14.
Well, they were
actors.
Kids. We were kids.
Who else was in your class? Because there's esteemed in every class from Yale. Who was in your class?
David Alan Grier. A wonderful actor who's recently passed away. A good friend of mine, a guy called Reggie Cathy. He won an Emmy for being on House of Cards.
Oh wow.
My class did not produce as many luminaries as some other classes.
Some classes have been pretty
Well,
extraordinary.
the class below mine,
the
class below mine and the class below that produced, so all the time that I was there, produced John Turturro and Fran McDormand and Rock Dutton and a million, tons and tons of famous actors. Anyway.
Did Frances McDormand, did that have anything to do with your Coen Brothers Association?
I suspect so.
Oh, nice.
I suspect.
See what happens when you go to a good school?
Yeah. Well, do you want me to tell you the story of that?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a long story, but I'll try and as you.
Okay, wait. You gonna tell me the Coen Brothers story? Because now all right. Well, I have to remember to come back to this. But give me this.
So what was it? What were we talking about?
Well, we were talking about what you wanted to be when you grew up and what
yeah.
show business was calling.
Okay. Right. So I wasn't sure that I wanted to be in show business, but show business was familiar to me.
Right.
My father took me to the set of Car 54, and I kind of knew what it felt like.
Fred Melamed.
Yeah. I loved cartoons when I was a kid, and for a while I wanted to be a director of animation, like Chuck Jones,
Okay.
And then, for most of my adolescence, I wanted to be a writer. I always wanted to be a writer, but I always acted in plays in high school. And,
Okay, so do you remember your first play?
My very first play was at Hunter. I was in 5th grade.
Yes.
It was a play written by the class about the western expansion of the United States, Conestoga wagons and all that.
They were smarty pants. Do you remember what your line was? Do you remember a line?
I don't remember my
Oh,
lines.
see.
I probably didn't remember them that night either. I don't remember my lines, but I played the father of the family who goes off to get to I don't know, get some food, forage for some food or something, and then gets attacked by a bear, but finally comes back towards the end, and there's a great happy reunion.
Nice.
Yeah.
And did you have stars in your eyes from that first experience?
Well, it made me realize that the feeling, I got a feeling from it of being loved that I think I never got in my everyday life.
Applause is really powerful.
It wasn't even applause. It was something else. It was well, it's interesting. It's interesting. I mean, I think, there's got to be something a little bit strange about you if you need strangers to make you feel like you're okay, which is what all actors do.
Strange, or we didn't get it.
Yeah.
And so we look for it wherever we can find it.
Yeah. I think there's. I mean, I know that's a bromide, but I think there's truth to it. Yeah, I had although I loved my parents and they loved me, I did not. I had a difficult childhood. What I would call a difficult childhood.
Can you give us an example of what that looked like?
Well, I had a great deal of trouble with my mother, particularly. My mother was. Both my parents are gone now. My mother was a person of volcanic emotions. Very powerful emotions, and a kind of narcissistic view of the world where she kind of couldn't tell the difference between what was good for her and what was good for anybody else. So if something made her happy, she felt as though that must make everybody happy. And I think she approached having children, as people do, it's not so unusual, to feel okay about herself. And I think she wanted to have children for a long time. My parents were married for 10 years, unable to have children.
Which is why they although is your sister older, younger?
Younger, as often happens.
As soon as they adopted you, they had a baby.
It took 6 years, but it didn't take long.
Okay.
That's a very frequent thing with adoption. So I think when my mother realized, my mother was very sort of consuming about things and like a force of nature, and had very strong ideas about how everything should be, and was quick to point out your failings or your divergences from whatever she thought was the right way or the way and everything. Also, my parents were my mother was a very beautiful woman. My father was good looking too. And I always felt a little disappointing in that realm. And I felt like they were very kind of looks oriented, very oriented towards appearances and not just handsomeness or beauty, but the appearance that you are thriving, that things are good, that you don't voice certain kinds of complaints, that kind of stuff. So I think when it turned out that I was not so happy with certain forces at work in my childhood, I think that was a bitter pill for my mother to swallow. And I had to, she was so powerful and so consuming in her style that I had to extract myself from her embrace at an age when I was very unprepared. I'm talking about, like 2 years old or 1 year old. unprepared to be an autonomous person, but I didn't have any choice. I felt I was going to be steamroller.
You have memory of being...
I can remember certain events that kind of characterize that feeling, and I had to kind of go off on my own in a way, which I think, to be honest, and I think I should be honest about this, I think that whole thing has had a very profound effect on my life. I think that there's a part of me that remains lonely. There's a part of me that yearns to have the kind of, I don't know what you call it, unity, the kind of limitless, boundaryless unity with another person that I experienced for some part of my childhood, but then had to flee.
Did you have it when you were... Was she that way?
When I was very young, but I think I realized, I intuited or understood that if I kept within that embrace, I was going to be overpowered, and that her ability to discriminate between what was good for me and what was good for her was too threatening to let stand.
That's amazing that you had that intuitive ability.
Well, I'm giving it fancy words now, but this is a kind of pre-verbal thing. You know? She was just so big with everything, you know. So I think I kind of got myself out of there, and I think she resented that. And I expressed a preference for my father often, which I think she found very painful. And we fought all the time that I grew up, all the time.
Was she proud of you? I mean, you are a smarty pants. Was she proud of that?
It's funny. I mean, my wife knew my parents well. She always remarks how my parents used to kind of brag to everybody about me, except not to me.
Yeah, well, that's a comment. I don't know if that's true of only Jewish parents, but that's a very common thing.
I kept thinking, it's funny, I remember various things in my life thinking, well, this is going to be the thing. I remember when I got into Yale, which for me was, this is 1978, it's 40 years ago, just getting out of college. Big, in my life, huge deal, right?
It's a huge deal at any time of life.
Okay, but you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So for me, especially wanting to be an actor and then come from a showbiz background and all that, I was so excited.
And 14 students in your class.
Right.
14 people got accepted. Right. 14.
So, and I was super excited about it. And of course I got the letter and I called my parents up and they were like, they were nice about it, but it wasn't like, it was like, oh yeah, that's great. And then, years later, I got my first Broadway play. I was not much older. I was only 20.
Was this Amadeus?
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
I was only 25 or 6. I can't remember. I was young, kid. And I thought, wow, Broadway. And my parents, when I was a kid, took me to Broadway shows. I can remember seeing, Carousel and Camelot and Oliver and all these. Yeah.
Davy Jones.
Oh, yes.
The original
Arthur
Dodger.
Great. Anyway, I thought, well, this is going to be the thing. And then the same thing, that was terrific, great, but it was like not, it didn't make them happy like I thought it was going to make them happy. And then, I got married. And it was much later. I was much older. I didn't get married until I was 42. I was much older.
Yeah.
Many things
First
happened.
marriage?
Yes, first and only. First and only.
Good.
So I thought, okay, great. Well, that was not. And then.
Grandchildren.
When I was 46 or 7, I was not young anymore, and they were old already. Grandchildren, right? Now, I don't care if you're Jewish, Italian, Hispanic, whatever you are.
Grandchildren's a good thing.
If grandchildren doesn't do it, an atom bomb will not do it.
Did grandchildren do it?
No. I mean, they liked them. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But the thing that, one time,
Wow.
Well, listen, I remember being with my wife, and my parents had called me. It was my birthday, and they had called me a day or two before. But on my actual birthday, I didn't talk to them, and there was no card, there was no nothing. And I said to my wife, "Listen, am I being like hypersensitive? Is it weird? I mean, I'm like 40, whatever. I was 45 or whatever. Shouldn't they like just call or something?" And she said, "Don't you get it?" She said, "Don't you understand? She said, they have you on this string. You just paid for their kitchen. They did their whole new kitchen. I was making a lot of money at the time. I was starring voiceovers, and, you know. And she said, you jump like when they call. You're like, yeah, what can I do? And suddenly I realized, right. And she said, wisely, their unhappiness is not to do with you. It's to do with their own lives. So that means you can't fix it. No matter how...
I'm in that program too. Yeah.
No matter what you do, no matter how smart you are, no matter what accolades you get, you're not going to fix it because that's them. It's not your responsibility. I thought my life's work was making life a winnable proposition for my family, especially my father.
Did your father ever acknowledge your success? Did he ever? I mean, they say in the program it's like going to the hardware store for milk. Did he ever give you the pat on the back?
Not in the way that I.
Did they live to see a serious man?
No, but she did, but he did not. I wish he had, because the whole last 10 years, he died about 13, 14 years ago. The whole last 10 years, you know, I got this unbelievable kind of second act to my career, which is, not only am I extremely grateful for it, it's very unusual to happen to a person, you know, in this time of life. So I really do wish that he had gotten to see that. She lived to see a good part of it.
And did that mean anything to her?
I think she was pleased by it. By that time, I had kind of stopped playing along, so she was resentful about that, and she was resentful of my wife and certain other things. But I think she still had a lot of love for me. The kind of the saddest thing about this all, and I think this is true of a lot of people, was she definitely loved me. She was
in her fashion,
in her way, in her way. I think she would have done anything in her power to have been a good mother. I just don't think that was her. You know, but she did get to see, you know, some of the latter years of success, and she died not very long after we moved to California, which is 6 years ago. And she did. I remember her saying to me, you know, I was concerned because I knew she was ill when we moved. She said, "Oh, California's going to be good for you. It's going to be a good thing." So she was.
That's huge.
It was a big thing.
That's huge because it had nothing to do with her.
Right.
Wow. Okay, so that for a narcissist, that was a big step.
Right, and she was, you know, I may be giving this impression of her. She also was very, she was full of life, and she was full of unbelievable style. She was fantastic with her taste was magnificent. She was funny. She was a real big person and everything. Not, I mean, physically, but big in her
personality.
Right. A lot, and a lot good. But not the kind of good for a parent.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
I get it. I totally get it.
So I don't want to give too much of a impression of her as being, you know.
No. I think you're being. I think you're being fair, because you're not blaming her. She wasn't equipped. She wasn't equipped to do it.
Yeah, and also I think, you know, I might have needed certain things because of the way I was, and, you know, you don't always get a good fit. But you know, to me, both my wife and I think, you know, we feel like it's really important to us to be good parents.
Okay, this was going to be my next question because I find that I went the other way with I became a full-time, I was going to be home, I was going to be a full-time mom, my kids became everything to me. When my daughter got into college, you know, I literally, with the jumping up and down and crying and all the things, right? And it's that it's not even it's genuine, right? It's genuine joy, thrilling, you know, all of that. Could our children be any more important to us than they are?
The problem is, at least from my perspective, is it's fine, it's good to be that way, but you also have to let them be who they are, which is not always easy.
It's not easy. But my daughter's in New York, and Hi, Samantha. And so
Hi,
she
Samantha.
she gets to live her whole thing, and I don't get to know. You know, it took me like 2 years to find out there's a fake ID. You know, all that kind of stuff. That, you know, if she was living under. You know, when I was 16, I got on a plane. I worked in a ski shop in Queens. I got on a plane and I went to L.A. at 16 from New York, and told my mother I was going to visit my father's girlfriend. She never picked up the phone and checked. I went to my boyfriend's house. I went to see my boyfriend. I was 16. My kids didn't get out of the house to go across the street without me knowing where they were going. I mean, you know, it's
Well,
like
it's also it's a total different time.
It is a different time.
And I find it shocking. Now, I'm not saying anything very new or sage. I couldn't wait. Now, my family kind of fell on hard times, and we moved to Florida.
Poor you guys.
Shitty Florida.
Oh,
Shitty
what's
Florida.
shitty Florida?
Hollywood, Florida. Really
Okay.
dumb.
Yeah.
And when my father lost his job, and he tried to work in real estate, didn't work out. Anyway, we moved to Florida, and
How old were you?
16. I was the same age that my kids are now.
So you left Hunter.
Hunter only went to 6th grade. At the time, Hunter was no boys after 6th grade.
But they have Hunter High School now. They didn't have Hunter High School then?
They did, but it's girls only.
Oh, not anymore.
No, I believe now it's...
Yeah, no. I know kids that have gone. It's co-ed, yeah.
No, at the time, at 6th grade, if you were a boy, you had to go elsewhere. So I went to Riverdale in the Bronx.
Oh, yeah, okay. Also a good school.
I went to Riverdale for 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. And then 11th grade, we moved to Florida. Why did I start to tell you that? I can't remember.
Because they fell on hard times. We were talking about our kids, different times.
Oh, yes. So I couldn't wait to learn how to drive. I mean, in Florida, like California, but even for some of my friends in New York, driving was a real representation of freedom.
Right.
I mean, there's public transportation in New York. You can take the subway or the bus or whatever.
Yes.
But if you live in California or Florida, you know, there's no way to get anywhere.
I mean, people do, but it's Jeff Garlin, but it's very difficult to do.
Jeff Garlin?
Yeah, he wrote a book about taking public transportation.
Jeff Garlin is my friend, but I think he was forced to take public transportation because he got
He
into a
was,
fight
but-
with a lady and had to bash her.
but then he wrote a book
Do you have
about
an affection for it?
about that whole experience of
Well, I think if
But
you're...
there's Ed Begley. I mean, there are people who.
Well, that's because he's also my friend. That's
Yeah.
because he's a big
Mine too.
environmentalist.
Yes, he is.
And he rides his bike everywhere.
Yes, he does.
So without the bike, he'd be in trouble.
Oh, but there are people that take public transportation. I mean, Jeff did the bus because he had to. But then, I mean, it can be done. People will get mad at us because there is a subway. There is a.
But if you're in New
train
York,
system.
it's a lot easier than it is in
much
LA.
easier.
It's you have to be going to certain specific places within LA.
Yes, you do.
But my point in saying all this is, I couldn't wait to learn how to drive. I
Right.
could not wait to learn how to drive. And the summer that we moved to Florida, I took driver's ed, and by the end of that summer, I knew how to drive. My son, you know, is kind of interested, but a lot of his friends are not interested even a little bit.
Right.
My son learned late.
The way kids socialize today, sorry for being such a bore, you know, everybody says the same thing, but they socialize in this strange way where everybody's sitting in their own room connected via these, you know,
Devices.
It's totally different. Totally different.
It is.
So there's not this great need to be on your own.
In the world.
Yeah.
Because we're all in the world all the time on here.
But that's different than
It's
being out in the
horrible.
world.
It's horrible.
I don't think it's horrible, but I think if you're just learning about the world, you should have a little contact with it.
I'm
Yeah.
60 years old. I'm 63 years old. I spend too much time. This is too much of my world, and I'm not out in the world nearly as much. When I was a kid, were we ever inside? We were never inside.
Well, that's true, but also I mean I also think that I remember we used to all summer we would go. We didn't lock our doors. We would you could go, and there was no cars in Fire Island, so therefore you could just walk around without worrying about anything.
Right.
And I would just play until it got dark every day with my friends.
Sure.
I don't think anybody does that anymore. I don't think. I don't know.
No. Kids don't play outside anymore. Everything is this. Everything is a device. Nobody plays outside. There is no playing outside.
Well, you know what? Something that surprised me about California, about Los Angeles, is there are some nice parks, but considering the fact that everybody lives in a sort of a sprawl. I'm surprised there aren't more parks, and more really nice parks.
It's true.
Than there are in Los Angeles. You know, there's so many, like...
parks only have here, parks only serve a purpose for Little League, for soccer. That's the only reason people...
Fields.
That's the only reason people don't go to parks like we went to Central Park to hang out.
Exactly.
And
well, I don't think kids hang out.
they don't hang out.
Why
don't you hang out?
What's wrong with you?
It's so nice out there.
And you know, how do they socially, like, how do you... I was so anxious to be with girls, physically, personally.
Right.
Well, that's mystery.
Because now there's Tinder and Bumble and all of these ways to do all of that online.
But you're not doing anything.
You're not doing
the preparation, isn't it?
It's the preparation, and then you can even match. Like, I'm on all those cockamamie things, and then you match with people, and then
you're on Tinder?
Of course I am. I'm writing a screenplay about it with a failed Tinder romantic partner, and but people even on them who connect don't connect. It's like, it becomes a texting thing. You don't meet in real life, and if you do, then you get ghosted. It's like this whole other. Real life doesn't really exist anymore. So it just, very little of this happens, and it's very sad.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a different world. I mean, we kind of can't, you can't go back. It's the way it is.
All right, so we could talk about this all night. We have to get back to Fred. So when was the decision made, I'm going to be an actor?
It wasn't really made. What happened was, I was in high school. I was going to Riverdale. And I had a bunch of friends that liked to do plays. One of my friends directed plays for fun. He was into Dylan Thomas, and he did Under Milkwood and a bunch of other things. And another friend of mine used to write his own little plays, little crazy, sick plays, and put his friends in them.
Nice.
And so I would act in these plays, and I really enjoyed it, but I never thought of doing it as a profession. And then when I got to college...
Where'd you go to undergraduate?
I went to Hampshire College, Hippie College.
And so what was why there, and what was your major?
Well, Hampshire was kind of like very, very free form.
There was no grades, isn't it? Like
Not only no grades, no required courses.
I think my stepbrother went there. Okay, yeah.
You had to complete what they called exams, which are kind of like tutored projects. And you do a kind of a thesis project.
How'd your parents feel about that?
They were okay about it. They were okay about it.
Okay.
They were rather... I mean, I applied to Yale as an undergraduate. I didn't get into Yale. I got into a bunch of other schools, but Hampshire was the most interesting. And I had some friends that were very bright that had gone to Hampshire, that I got to high school with. And this one particular friend of mine, Andy Shea, whose plays I acted in, had gone on to Hampshire and loved it. So I went to Hampshire. And as soon as I got there, the first year, he was doing these plays again with his friends, with videos and very unusual kind of avant-garde, crazy little things. So he said to me, "Listen, I'm doing the play. Like I'm sure." So I did. It was just like something fun to do. And people saw me in the plays, and other people asked me to be in their plays. So it was not. It wasn't a decision I made.
What was your course of study when you first got there?
Well, I didn't.
You didn't need one at the beginning.
I mean, I was interested. I was always interested in writing, in literature.
Oh, right.
So I took a Shakespeare course. I took a course. I took a playwriting course with Jean-Claude Van Natali, the great playwright.
So this all was bleeding over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was interested in physics. I always thought physics was fascinating, but my math was too weak to really support, real cosmology.
There's a very interesting element of that in A Serious Man.
Yes. Schrödinger, that whole thing. But that has always been fascinating to me. But as I say, my math skills were just too weak to really support that. So that's what I studied, and I studied photography. But I kept doing these plays, and before I knew it, and they let you alone in Hampshire. You could spend your entire 4, 5, 10 years there just doing plays.
Okay.
So, but then if you want to graduate, you have to sort of organize them into a thesis.
Okay.
So I did that. And I began to really like it. And then the last year that I was there, 2 women who had a company called Shakespeare and Company, or were planning a company called Shakespeare and Company. One of them was Tina Packer, the other was Kristen Linklater, the famous voice theorist. Tina Packer had been a Royal Shakespeare Company actress. So they came in residence at Smith, which is one of the 5 colleges that Hampshire is a consortium of, part of. So I met them, and they put me in some plays that they directed,
Mm-hmm.
and I was fascinated by their approach, which was different than what I had known.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, for serious, that maybe this was something that I really wanted to do as a life.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't until I was my last year of college.
Mm-hmm. So now, so you got into Yale, and I'm curious because Samantha's would love to follow that path. Was Yale was it all it's cracked up to be? Was it a thrilling experience for you?
It was mixed.
Okay.
It was mixed.
How so?
There were people there that were terrific.
Mm-hmm.
Many of whom were students, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
rather than faculty members.
Mm-hmm.
There were some faculty members who were not. There were some wonderful ones.
Mm-hmm.
Some who were not up to what you might have expected or what I expected.
Did you do the Yale repertory? Did you?
I was in the Yale rep, but that just happened. There was a kind of a serendipity to that.
Mm-hmm.
I did a play. There's something called the Yale Cabaret, which is a student-run.
Oliver Platt's the one I was trying to think of. Who
Yes.
applied a few times before he got in.
Ah,
Or maybe he didn't, but then he came back and he ended up going somewhere else, but he came back and he got into Yale Rep and he had a bigger part than the people that were in Yale. That was the story that he told me. Something like that. Anyway, go ahead, I'm sorry.
so the Rep was a professional theater
Right.
that had mostly professional actors in it, but sometimes students took roles in it. So the first year that I was there,
Mm-hmm.
I did a play at the Cabaret,
Mm-hmm.
which is an all student-run kind of crazy freak-out thing. And it so happened that Robert Brustein, who was the dean of the drama school when I came there,
Mm-hmm.
happened to see this play. I mean, he didn't see every play, but he happened to see this particular one, and he liked me in it.
Mm-hmm.
So he suggested to the director of this play that was on at the Rep, a guy called Keith Hack. It was Mahagoni, the Brecht Weill play.
Mm-hmm.
Suggested to Keith Hack that he cast me. So me and David Grier, David was then known as David Grier, not David Alan Grier,
Right.
cast the two of us in that play. So we were the only first-year students that were
Oh,
cast.
wow. Oh, first year,
Yeah.
no less.
Yeah, that was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I got to be in the Yale Rep. I did a bunch of other plays there.
And then you went on. I know Stage Door Manor. You did the Guthrie. You had a lot. Did you think you were going to have a career in theater? Was that your goal?
Well, we weren't trained for anything else.
Yeah.
I think everybody.
No film courses at all? None.
None.
Wow.
The thinking was, I think, that probably incorrect.
Meryl Streep.
Yeah.
Look what she did with that.
Well, Meryl Streep was a very highly regarded theater actress before she was in movies. I think the thinking was that if you were competent as a stage actor, you would have no trouble adapting that to movies. I don't think that's true, by the way.
It's a very different medium, isn't it?
Yes, extremely different, and one that I never liked. People find that, because some people find that shocking that I say that.
You didn't like theater?
No, don't like it.
Okay, wow.
Wow. That may be too strong to say I don't like it. If the play is great, I can appreciate it.
Okay.
But I don't have the kind of love for it that a lot of my friends and colleagues do.
So why would you choose Yale?
Well, because I wanted to get trained.
The best.
Yeah. And by the way, I didn't realize that until much later that I didn't like it.
Okay. And okay, so you did a lot of regional theater. How?
Not a lot.
Well, you did some. How did you make that transition to Broadway? And how'd you get Amadeus? How did that happen?
I did it when I got out of Yale, which was 1981. I got hired before the end of the school year to do a season at the Guthrie.
Nice.
Did
they come and scout? Is that that?
No, there was this big centralized audition.
The audition.
So Richard Foreman, I don't know if you know Richard Foreman, the director, playwright, kind of avant-garde, interesting guy, was doing a couple of plays at the Guthrie that year. So he saw me and cast me in this play, a Moliere play. And I went to do that, and then I was in The Tempest and a couple of other shows there too. So I spent a year there, and then I came back to New York, and when I was in New York, I got a job on a soap opera. I got a job on One Life to Live.
Nice.
Yeah.
I used to watch One Life to Live. Who were you?
I was Alberto Cervantes, who was...
I wasn't watching it after college already, so yeah, that's why I don't remember. I would know you then.
Yeah, you would...
Wait, was Teo Pegues on One Life to Live? Is
Not
that the
then.
show? Okay. because he's going to be on here next week, too.
So I got a job on One Life to Live, which lasted about 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And
did you like that?
I liked it, but I was very nervous. I was very nervous doing any kind of acting. There was an actor who was my friend on that show called Michael Storm. He played a character called Larry Wolak, one of the main characters on One Life to Live, in Landview. Landview. So Larry Wolak had been on that show already for like 13 years.
Yeah.
He was a little tired of it, but he, it was a good living and all that. And Judith Light was on it in those days.
Wow.
The great Judith Light. So the guy who played, Michael Storm played Larry Wolak, knew that I was very easy to crack up. He had the ability to cross one eye. So if this is his downstage eye, you wouldn't see it. The camera wouldn't see it. They could make this eye cross.
Oh.
And I was so easy. I was so easy. I was nervous, so I would laugh easily. And like eventually they warned me. They said, like, you even though it's a tape show, it's not live.
Yeah.
You're costing money. You're like breaking up. I was so nervous. Anyway.
Did you go back and study film acting at all?
No.
Never.
No, never have. Never have.
Interesting.
I learned the principles that I learned in stage acting apply, but you have to. There are certain other things
you have to get
learn.
small. You have to get so much smaller, and
well, you have to keep within the boundaries of what is real.
Yeah, you have to get really real.
Yeah, the underpinnings are the same, but you have to. The size of things has to be real. Has to be human.
Right.
By the way, if you're
even smaller than human. If you've got that camera right there.
The way I think of it is, if you're starting out from something that is real, you can actually be quite effusive.
True. That's true.
But what happens is there's a temptation to goose everything, and that you can't do.
Right. It's the authenticity staying at the.
Yeah, you have to keep the what's and you have to stay alive. It's acting.
You have to stay internally alive.
And your perceptions have to be alive. You have to keep this information not just going up, but coming in.
Right, right.
Acting is this funny dichotomy where the way I view it anyway, you have to both have something that you've prepared. You work on it. You don't just do it when you get there. You've worked on it. I don't just mean learning it, but how to do it.
Right.
But then, when the time comes to do it, you have to also be completely open, or as open as you can, to the moment and what's happening from the other people and the place that you're in and all that. So you have to do both at the same time. That's what's hard about it. Anyway, so then
how'd you get Amadeus?
I auditioned. My agent.
How'd you get an agent?
Also, those big auditions, those centralized auditions.
Nice.
And I went with an agent called Lionel Larner, who was a big star agent. He didn't have any. I don't want a commercial agent. I want somebody who handles he was
legit.
Not just legit, only stars, only named stars.
So how did that happen?
He had a woman agent who was sort of one of his seconds, one of his minions, who saw me at Yale and a couple of things, and said, "This guy's going to be a star." Well, I showed her.
You've done pretty well.
I can't.
You've done pretty well.
Anyway, she signed me to Lionel Larner, or agreed to represent me. I shouldn't say signed me. She had a client named Daniel Davis. Do you know Daniel Davis?
I don't think so.
He played on The Nanny. He played the butler.
Oh yeah, sure.
So he played Salieri in the bus and truck Amadeus that I was first cast in.
Okay.
So I did that, and I got the audition because her client was playing the lead in it. I auditioned, I got the part, I did it. I did that a total of, I think, about 17 months.
That's a long
between
time.
that and the Broadway show, I did both. About 6 months into it, I began to have terrible, unbelievably bad stage fright. Unbelievably powerful stage fright.
Wow.
I have a friend, Phil Bosco. He just passed away yesterday. You might know him. Also suffered.
Did he pass away?
Yes, he died yesterday or the day before. He was 88. But he also, as a beloved actor in the theater, suffered miserably with stage fright. I mean, a horrible, powerful stage fright. My stage fright was so bad that it took every ounce of courage and discipline I had to just get my ass to the theater. I just hated it.
Wow.
Hated it. But I was so young that I thought, I have to do this. This is a Broadway gig. I mean, it was a Broadway show, I had friends that I went to school with who would have been thrilled to have a Broadway show.
I was just going to ask you if that first time walking out into the footlights on Broadway, did you have that moment?
It was like getting on the cyclone at Coney Island. I was like, wow! So it wasn't good.
It wasn't good. Wow.
There's 1,200 people out there. Look at me. I didn't. Mm-hmm. It sounds strange because I'm an actor. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. Mm-hmm. I had chosen to be an actor for some not so healthy reasons, as people do. Mm-hmm. I thought it was my responsibility to, as I said before, make life seem like a winnable proposition to my parents, mm-hmm. particularly my father, and their surrogates, the audience. Mm-hmm. So I thought an actor has to be superhuman. Mm-hmm. I no longer view acting that way. Mm-hmm. Actors have to be human, have to be human beings, not superhuman. Mm-hmm. But the pressure, mm-hmm. because of the way I viewed it, having to make the audience believe that life is magical and all that, that pressure was so great that I began to bridle against it. It began to be an enormously heavy weight. And I think that made acting very, very problematic for me.
Wow. And
like half the way through it, mm-hmm. I said, oh my God, it was horrible. I had to resort to taking drugs. When I say drugs, I mean legal drugs, mm-hmm. but drugs just to get me through the performance.
So now, how did that start for you? I know you're a long time sober. What was your drug of choice?
I don't talk about it.
Okay. So, but was not being? Was that because you were so uncomfortable?
No. I mean, I think it didn't help. I mean, or it didn't hurt. I think that heightened things. Okay. But I think I would have had that
propensity anyway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway. Mm-hmm. But I went through a horrible, horrible time where I just kind of had this kind of nervous breakdown while I was still doing the show, and I wouldn't let myself quit.
Wow.
It was horrible.
Wow.
And then finally it was over, mm-hmm. and I said to myself, "Oh, this is bad. This is bad.
Let me do it again."
No, I chose. I said, "I'm never going to set foot on stage again." It's horrible. I made this awful mistake.
Wow.
I chose to be an actor. I went to Yale. I've been on Broadway and all that, and I cannot handle it. I don't like it. It's awful.
So what happened?
So I had an agent. Mm-hmm. By then, the woman who signed me at Lionel Larner mm-hmm. had moved on to another agency, and I went with her. She went to Abrams. Mm-hmm. Was been my agent forever. Mm-hmm. And they had a very big voiceover department, mm-hmm. a very big commercial department, a very big voiceover department. Mm-hmm. So I said, "Listen, I'd like to go out for voiceovers." And
you've got a great voice for it.
Harry Abrams said to me, "Well, they don't want voices that are mellifluous. They want voices that cut through, and So very shortly out of the box, I got a couple of quite nice accounts. I got Chanukah Oil and I got Mercedes-Benz.
Wow.
So there I was. I had quit acting mm-hmm. In the usual sense of the word.
Right. I was going to say it's still acting, but
yeah, it's a kind of acting. Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden, and I didn't have very long idle. I was idle for maybe a few months, and that mm-hmm. was it. Mm-hmm. And then I got MCI. Eventually I got CBS News, CBS Sports. I had a giant career as a voiceover guy.
Is this where you were?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sybil Trent. Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I acted, mm-hmm. but only in little things where I could have fun, where there wasn't a lot of pressure, and I wouldn't audition for anything.
On stage?
No, movies.
In movies, okay. You wouldn't audition for anything. No. So how would you get things?
There were certain casting directors. Mm-hmm. Juliet Taylor was one who mm-hmm. cast all of Woody's films. Mm-hmm. Ellen Lewis was another. Mm-hmm. Let's see, there was a guy, well, I won't go into all the different things. But
how did the Woody thing, because you've done 7 of his films, which only Diane Keaton, Mia Farrow, and Woody himself have done more Woody Allen films. How is it because once he got comfortable with you, he wanted you back? What was that about?
Well, I don't know the answer except to say that Juliet, mm-hmm. who was his casting director, was mm-hmm. fond of me. Mm-hmm. I guess he liked me. I liked him. We had a kind of to call it a friendship might be over dignifying it somewhat.
Okay.
But there was a kind of a kind of a friendship. And I think also physically, I think he liked the fact that I was so big and he's so small. The time, now I forgot to mention in this, during the time that I was doing all these voiceovers, I got extremely heavy, extremely heavy. I was over 400 pounds.
Oh, wow.
I'm hardly thin today, but I'm talking about I was huge. I was over 400 pounds and 6'1". So the kinds of roles that I would have been right for were relatively limited. But part of that had to do with the fact that I didn't like the way I was physically. Part of it had to do with the fact that I wasn't having certain needs met. Part of it had to do with just the relationship to food that was sick. Or if not sick, not typical. Anyway, I got very, very, very heavy during that time, during those years. And it didn't matter because I was doing voiceovers, but occasionally Juliet Taylor would call, or Barbara Shapiro, or somebody else would say, Woody has a psychiatrist, it's 6 days, you want to do it? Sure. There's a Cher movie, Cher, you play the head of the legal aid society that Cher works for. It's a movie called Suspect.
Oh God, I love that movie, sure.
I play Cher's boss. It's 3 weeks, you want to do it? Sure. So I was in this kind of golden position where I didn't care if they said, in other words, I wouldn't audition and I didn't need to do it. I was making millions of dollars.
Wow,
And
as a
I was
voiceover
a young
actor.
guy.
Nice.
Well, it was very good in a way. But I had no responsibilities. I had no kids, I had no wife, I had no, my college debt was over in the first year because I made all this money, paid it off. So I had no responsibilities of that kind. But I wasn't terribly happy. There were certain things that I really wanted in life. And I thought myself too defective, too weak, too much of a broken-hearted baby to ever be able to tolerate the things that I really wanted the most. Like,
Such as?
well, somebody to go through life hand in hand with, to use a corny expression, but to really go through life.
A partner.
I had lots of relationships with women, but they tended to be based on an inequality in power rather than more of a shared thing, more of a partnership, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I do.
I had girlfriends, you know, but not what I wanted, which was to really go through life with somebody, with all that means. I like children, but I thought, oh, I'm too selfish, I'm too messed up, I'm too needy. I wanted to do some kind of work, and don't get me wrong, I liked making money, I still do. I'm still very fond of money.
Yeah.
But I was using, you know, like a tenth of my heart and soul and ability. And the rest of it, I was doing some writing projects, but they were speculative. So I wasn't really, all these things that I really wanted in life, I just thought, I'm too messed up. I'm just too messed up. I'll never get them. And for me, most of the pain and difficulty in my life that I've caused has not been caused by trying to do something. It's been caused by my getting the thing that I could get rather than the thing that I really wanted. If you see what I mean by that. Rather than pursuing the thing that my heart really desired, I was unwilling to endure the uncertainty, the all that. So instead, I got the things that I knew I could get, and I didn't know the difference between happiness and comfort. Those are two different things. I made do with comfort. I became addicted to comfort because happiness, I thought, well, I'll never get that. You see what I mean? So my life became about the amassment of comfort.
Do you remember at that period, like, what would make you like? Did food didn't make you happy?
Food and women, two things.
Okay.
Only two. And occasionally a great piece of film or a great book. But food and women, more direct path.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, how did that shift for you?
Well, I had 20 years doing that, and it was, though I, you know, parts of it were not great, most of it was good, and then I met my wife. I was in recovery, or dedicated to recovery, sort of beginning it, and then, you know, after we got married, we had children. This was a long, you know, many years, and then the bottom kind of fell out of the voiceover world for me. There was a kind of a sea change that happened where they stopped wanting dramatic sounding voices and they started wanting more real sounding voices. And that's just not my thing. And I was a visible enough player in the good years for long enough that people kind of knew I wasn't associating me with a certain kind of thing.
Right.
I was the voice of the NFL, Mercedes-Benz, you know, very often these kind of iconic big voice things.
Sure.
So all of a sudden, and then the guy, there was a new guy who came into CBS Sports and kind of changed the guard. CBS Sports was for many years my main. For 8 years I had this job, CBS Sports, unbelievable job, unbelievable. 8 hours a week, 2 4-hour days per week, 8 hours each, 2 days, 4 hours each day, $8,000 a week, 52 weeks a year.
That's a pretty nice gig.
Everything, whatever the hell I wanted to do the whole rest of the week.
Yeah.
For 8 years that went on.
That's damn nice.
And plus all kinds of others. But
Right.
that was the basis.
Right.
Then this guy came in and changed a lot. And I was history. And then nobody wanted to hire me. And I didn't know what to do. And by that time, I had a responsibility, we had children, and then shortly after that, our children were diagnosed with autism, and I wasn't working. And of course, I had some savings, you know, I made a lot of money,
Right.
but we had 2 houses. We had an apartment in New York, plus 2 kids, plus we had a house out in Montauk, and things were looking very dire. And then when our children were both diagnosed with autism, we were like, what are we going to do? This is bad. And we were told to get services immediately. It was of absolute essential importance to get services right away. But there was this avalanche of cases of autism in New York City where we lived, and you couldn't get, even though we were entitled legally to them, there just weren't providers to give the service. So we happened to have this house out in Montauk, and we had a pediatrician out there, and she told us about this school that existed out there.
Oh, wow.
That was a very good school, very unusual school, called the Child Development Center in the Hamptons. And we met with them out there, and our children were long before school age. They were still, you know, tiny little kids. Our kids were 14 months old, 15 months old
Oh, wow.
at the time.
What made you think to get them diagnosed?
Alec, who was our son who has really profound autism still, I wouldn't say profound, but serious autism, neither one of them would make eye contact easily. Although that's not so unusual in kids that age.
Right.
They didn't respond to their names very often. And Alec, we took him to we were in Florida visiting my wife's parents. We took him to a playground, and there was one of those things that looks like a ship's wheel, like a spinning wheel, like a ship's wheel. He would spin it and stand in front of it for an hour. And the moment you tried to take him away from it, he would start crying. He would stand in front of it forever. And then we started noticing that he had this kind of wheel perseveration with anything. Spinning tires of toys, trucks, ceiling fans, anything that spun. And my wife was watching a TV show where they were talking about a family that had several children with autism. And she said to me, do you think Alec might be autistic? I said, no, I don't think so. Kids that are autistic are different. They're in their own world and everything. And then I went to my computer and I looked it up on the internet to see what the signs were. And they listed like 10 things, and he had every single thing that they mentioned. So we asked somebody what we should do, and we had a state agency suggest a psychologist who came to the house, looked at them, diagnosed them. And once they were diagnosed, she diagnosed Alec as having autism and my other son, Lee, as having PDD, which is a kind of...
that's what my son has, PDD.
It means you're on the spectrum, but you don't have quite severe enough problems for it to be considered autism. It means you have some symptoms. In
What is it called? What is the lesser one called?
PDD.
Asperger's?
Asperger's, yeah.
That's something different.
That's something different.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then we freaked out, and I wanted to find somebody who was the biggest expert that I could on early childhood autism.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to my relative, who's a big famous doctor, and he said, "Okay, we're going to put you in touch with this guy. He started the autism program at Columbia. He's very famous all over the world." So we went and took them to see him. You know, not covered by insurance and all that. And, he said they both have full autism. So he said, I know that's hard to hear, but I want to tell you the truth so that you can get the help that you know, the most help you can. He said, if you need any kind of documentation, if you need me to go to court or anything like that, happy to do it. So then we found out we couldn't get the services. They just weren't available. So out in the Hamptons where we lived, because it's Suffolk County, they had the services available. People hadn't discovered this massive, now they have,
Right.
but people were slower to find out about autism. So we went to the school, and this woman who ran the school, great woman, absolutely terrific, said to us, listen, if you can, this was June, she said, if you can move out here by the end of August, full time, you have to live out here full time, I can guarantee you 30 hours per child per week, that's 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, per child, in-home ABA, and then yeah, this is, nobody gets this anymore. And then another 5 hours per child in the school.
Per day?
No, per week.
Okay.
Of getting speech and anything else they may need.
Wow.
So that's an unbelievably...
That's a huge...
And of course, all free.
Wow.
Paid for by the federal government.
Wow.
They hired 2 therapists to work with us full time. We had people working with us. 2 people come to our house every day.
Wow.
So our kids had unbelievably intensive, good intervention.
Wow.
Now, there's no question in my mind that it helped both of them. Lee, as I've explained, whatever manifestation his autism has anymore is so mild that no one ever...
And he's in a gifted and...
Yeah, he's in the gifted program at North Hollywood High School. He just got a report card. I had to explain to him again that he got more A's in the last year than his mother and me have gotten in our entire combined 44 years of education. He doesn't always get straight A's, but for the last year and a half he's gotten them. And also he's not nerdy. He's very social. He's very smart. He's funny. He's witty.
So he outgrew it?
What happened? I don't know.
At what point in his... At what point did it shift?
His was never as noticeable or as bad, but around the time he was maybe 4 or 5, he started looking very much like a typical child. He started our other son, Alec, has speech, but he didn't really start talking until he was about 7. And he still speaks, you know, in a not really, he speaks haltingly, with difficulty, and he's better at answering questions than he is talking spontaneously. Lee is, you can't shut him up, and he's very, very articulate, very smart. Very smart. He's also really talented. He has an unbelievably good ear. You know the old Mr. Magoo Christmas Carol? Do you know that?
Yeah, sure.
So we've always watched that in our family. We like it. So he had the idea that he wanted to do his own Mr. Magoo Christmas Carol, where he does all the voices, all of them. So we're working on it right now. I do a narrator voice because you can't see, there's no picture. But he plays all the other voices except for the 2 female voices. That's like 14 voices, and they're great. Seriously, he's really, really
I believe
talented.
you.
He just finished his first movie last year, first feature. Oh, here they are.
And here they are.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi.
There's Lee.
They are.
Hey,
Here's
Lee.
We were your dad's just talking about you.
Hello there.
Hello, Lee. How are you?
I'm good.
You want to come on and say hello? Your dad was just talking about you. Hello.
How you doing?
Hi. Sorry to barge in.
We're over there. That's okay. That's okay.
No, we've gotten long.
You walked in at the right time.
It's very
actually.
casual, though.
It's very casual, so you guys are welcome to say hey.
See the camera over there? Come over
It's
here.
over
Vic.
here.
Oh, I'm gonna get out
Let
of
me
this.
see.
Hi, I'm Leslie.
Hi, Leslie.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I'm Vicki.
Just
Good to
talking
meet
about
you.
the
Nice to
girl.
meet you.
Yeah. Your dad's
Oh,
just
really
talking about
great
how great you
things.
guys are.
Oh, is that done? That's like.
No,
is it?
No, it's,
Oh,
it's on right
We're
now.
live. We
Oh.
were just hearing about your Mr. Magoo.
Oh.
Which I'm gonna have to see when it's done.
Yeah, I'd
Come
love
here,
to
Ellen.
see.
I-
If you,
I look
if you
forward to
hear
it.
it, it's just voices. There's no picture.
Oh, there's never. Oh, it's gonna be an
like a
audio.
radio
Oh,
play.
okay. Oh, it's a radio.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Where'd you wind up eating?
We went to City Walk. We got I got my usual, the teriyaki chicken bowl. I think we got some stuff for you, right, Mom?
What?
We got some stuff for Dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
All right.
So yeah,
Great.
I'm gonna retire because I still have some work to do.
Okay, buddy.
Right.
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you too. Thanks for letting me be on the stream.
You are.
Anyway. So you see,
So I see.
two different
So I
people.
yeah, but I mean, I would never in a million years.
No.
Never.
Well,
in a
there's
million years.
truly, I mean, there's, whatever vestiges of it are, they're so subtle that they essentially don't matter.
It's miraculous,
Yeah, it is miraculous. but-
especially for that one high esteemed doctor to make that diagnosis. Doesn't.
Well,
it's crazy to me.
I don't think he was wrong. I just
Mhm.
think it's such a complex problem that we talk about it as if it's one thing. It's really not one thing. It's a lot of different possible things. Anyway,
So all right. So now your family's home. So before we let you go, how did you meet the Coen Brothers? How did that happen?
okay. So during this period when we moved out to Montauk to get these services,
And so meanwhile, you're living in Montauk, but you're not really working. Is that when you're not
That is
really
exactly
working?
right.
Okay.
exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
And we had savings, but after a couple of years, they were like kind of depleted.
Mm-hmm.
We wound up selling our apartment in New York.
Mhm.
We lived full time out in Montauk.
Mhm.
And I would do I did like Law and Order and stuff. But
Are you getting? Do you get residuals as a voice actor?
you get from some commercials, but my accounts by that time were pretty much dried up.
Okay.
Pretty much dried up.
Mm-hmm.
So things were looking rather dire.
Mm-hmm.
And I had like a year's worth of money before I would have to do something really kind of serious, like sell our house and move something smaller or something like that.
Right.
So this friend of mine said, "Look, if money were no object, what would you like to do?"
Mm.
I said, "Well, if I didn't have to worry about it, I'd like to go back to acting and writing like I used to, but I mean, it's such a long shot." He said, "Well, why don't you try? I mean, you got nothing to lose." So I did, to no great success initially. I was like on Law and Order, and the typical, everybody's ever done demonstration of something at Bloomingdale's in New York gets to be on Law and Order. It's not work. And then one day I was sitting at home with my wife in Montauk, and the phone rang, and she got it, and she talked to the person on the other end. She said, "Do you know somebody named Joel Coen?" And I know an accountant named Joel. So I said, "Joel Coen the accountant, or Joel Coen, Joel and Ethan Coen?" She said, "Joel and Ethan Coen." Now, I knew them a little bit because I had gone to school with Fran McDormand and John Turturro, and I knew John Goodman, and so I knew a lot of people in their retinue, and I had
Right.
auditioned many years prior for Barton Fink.
Oh.
Do you remember in Barton Fink, Jack Lipnick, the guy, the movie mogul who hires Barton Fink?
I don't remember my kid's birthday. I mean, I do, but
Anyway.
I love the movie, but I don't remember it at all.
So that guy, he's
John Turturro, that's all I remember.
this character is a movie studio executive who hires Barton Fink.
Okay.
The guy who played it is a wonderful actor and was nominated for an Oscar for it.
Who? All right, see? Never mind.
I should know because
Okay.
it's with my agency.
I'll
It's a
look
terrific
it up
actor.
later. Okay.
Anyway,
Mhm.
I placed. I came in second, according to Ethan.
Mhm.
So they knew me, and also Fran. I was
Mm-hmm.
quite friendly with Fran and John Turturro and some other people like that. And they told me they were looking at some footage of Taya Leone for another role, not in this movie, in another movie.
Mhm.
And I happened to be doing a scene with her in a Woody film.
What would he film? What was
I
Taylor
think it was.
in?
I think it was Hollywood Ending.
Okay.
Hollywood Ending,
Mhm.
which is one of the ones that nobody knows.
Mhm. I know I saw it, but I don't remember it.
It's the one where he's the director who goes blind. And
Yeah. Yes, actually, it's very funny. Yeah.
so I had a scene with Taya Leone in it, and they were
Uh-huh.
looking at her, but they happened to notice me, and that reminded them of me,
Nice.
whom they knew.
Mhm.
And Joel went on the phone. He said, "Listen, we've written this movie. It's called A Serious Man.
Mhm.
There's a part in this movie. I just have a feeling that you'd be really good in this part. Are you interested?"
Mhm.
I was like, check my book.
Okay, now wait a minute. This is after you said, I'd really like to go back to acting.
Yeah.
This is all manifestation, because this show is about how to make these things happen, and manifesting is...
Well, it was about a year of very difficult, panicky, in between the time that...
But still, there was a desire. It was said out loud.
Yes.
There was an intention.
There was an intention, but I didn't think the intention was going to come to much, honestly.
Okay.
I
I don't know that we have to. I think we just kind of have to have the intention. But anyway.
So they said, come to New York. So I came to New York. I talked to them, and they said, yeah, we definitely want you to do it. We're not going to see anybody else. They had seen a lot of people and not found anybody else that they liked. They said, the only problem is that you should understand is there are 3 movies we're kind of doing simultaneously, and one of them is Burn After Reading, which is a big star-studded movie. It has
Fantastic,
it has George Clooney in it and
Brad
Brad
Pitt.
Pitt. So we have to do it based on the availability of those actors.
Right.
So we may not get to A Serious Man for a while.
What year is this?
This was 2006 or 7. Can't remember. I think it was beginning of 2007 or end of 2006. So they said we're not sure when we're going to get to it. So I said okay. Meanwhile, I'm like running out of money.
Right.
So, but they said, well, we definitely want you to do it. I said, okay, great. So I'm all excited about that. Something to really, get excited about, and that's a really good part. I know if I'm good in it, it's gonna be great. So like 6 months pass, 9 months pass. I don't hear anything, nothing. Finally, a year passes, and I thought, shit, this is gonna never happen. This is one of those things that happens in show business where, a director has a project and it falls apart. The financing goes away, or some actor drops out of it, and that's that. Finally, after like 14 months, I get a call. We're going to do it. So I go to Minneapolis and do it, and I had a total, absolute blast. I mean, I just loved doing it. I had such a great time.
Richard Kind.
Richard
My. The whole cast is
Michael
amazing.
Stuhlbarg, everybody.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
Who's the woman who played the woman that you were courting? What's her name?
Sari Lennox, who was a local hire in Minneapolis, very, very talented, very good actress, now lives out here in California. But just a terrific cast all around, and them. And I got to be friendly with them during the making of it, which I, am deeply grateful. They're very interesting, wonderful people, very smart and funny and interesting. Anyway, so I did it, and then by that time I was like pretty much out of money, and I had to wait another year for it to come out.
Oh.
Because that's how movies are made. But when it came out, even though it's not sort of in the it's not the most seen of their movies, it made enough of an impression on enough people, and people saw the business. And it was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, and I won an Independent Spirit Award for it. And so, all of a sudden, it put me at the age of whatever I was, 52 then, or whatever. I think it was 52 when it came out, 53, into this,
Castable.
Suddenly new, beyond Castable, I was getting offers for things like, left and right. It was great. So in a million years, I would never, ever have guessed that was to be the trajectory of things. But, it turned out good. But I think by that time, a lot of things had rearranged within me, and I viewed acting very differently. I enjoyed it, really thoroughly enjoyed it.
I was going to say, do you appreciate it? Now, is it happy as like, what's happy? You were talking about comfort and happy. What's happy now?
It's totally joyous for me to do. Even the shitty parts are great. There's no bad. I never have a bad experience with it. It's so interesting to me. It's all about people and how they do things and what they tell themselves, which to me, like, that's the most interesting thing in the world. And it's always different. Each part is different. Each bunch of people you work with is different. And it's exciting. I've been on 100 film sets, hundreds, more than 100. There's no place more exciting. It's always really.
I'm so happy to hear that you have such appreciation for it now, because
love it.
your attitude before was really pissing me off. Because my daughter would kill for the experience that you had.
I was aware of that.
Yeah.
And that was making me feel even worse, because I knew I should feel good about it, or should feel proud of it. But
Well,
I was
don't shit on yourself, as they say.
right. But I didn't realize why I was doing it.
What was there something? Did you have a spiritual awakening? Was there something that shifted
I had the spiritual awakening before that, and I don't know whether or not how much. I had a spiritual awakening during the hardest part of Amadeus, actually.
Okay.
But the spiritual awakening that I had that was more formal was later on when I got into the whole step thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what that was to do with was, well, to put it simply,
Mm-hmm.
I met this guy
Mm-hmm.
in these programs,
Mm-hmm.
and he said to me, he took thousands, literally thousands of people through the steps.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the real,
Poobahs.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but really a fascinating person.
Mm-hmm.
And he said many things that were very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that was kind of the most useful to me was, he said, instead of thinking of God as this thing that you pray to, that you address your wishes to,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think God wants of you? And I thought about it. And it was so obvious. It's to be a better person.
Mm-hmm.
Obvious. Not by the rules of Judaism or Christianity or,
To be of service.
well, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but of service not just to these programs,
No,
but to be of
yeah.
service in
life.
life. That all that. What does it mean to be of service? It means to make the burdensome part of life less burdensome for people that have to carry most of the burden,
Mm-hmm.
including myself,
Mm-hmm.
and to be generous in life
Mm-hmm.
to everybody that I can be generous to try and keep my word about things,
Mm-hmm.
to try and, well, that's really it. To try and come from a place of being kind.
When did that happen?
On my knees.
How long ago?
That was 1993.
Because I think it's really interesting that you had that spiritual awakening, and yet you had many life challenges after that.
I had many life challenges my whole life. My whole life. But so does everybody.
Yeah, but then you did get to find what when did you discover what happiness was?
Well, I got to experience it. I mean, I kind of knew what it was, but I got to experience it. A lot of things changed in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I stopped being so phobic about. I had a terrible fear of flying.
Mm-hmm.
Awful. I didn't step on a plane for over 25 years.
Oh wow. Mm-hmm.
Now I fly all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a long story. I'm married with children, which is something I never thought would happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
My work is very deeply satisfying to me, which I never thought would happen to me. I have a lot of problems. I have all kinds of. I have diseases. I have, listen, I don't want to bore you. I have a lot of physical problems,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm walking around. I'm able to work. I'm able to enjoy life
Mm-hmm.
a lot.
Mm-hmm.
A lot.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends. I have 2 friends in my class that are dead already. And they were in good shape compared to me.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both dead.
Mm-hmm.
They both smoked.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that had something to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Life is so big
Mm-hmm.
that the only generality that's true about it is whatever you say it is, it is. If you say life is unfair, full of pain, unremitting torture, you're right, it is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you say life is beautiful and full of promise,
Mm-hmm.
you're right. It's all those things.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do entirely with your frame of mind.
Perspective.
Exactly. If you're in a bad place, to use a corny modismo,
Mm-hmm.
Gornistelfen, you can have all great things happen to you and it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And the converse is also true. If you're in a good state of mind, you hear a nice song, you see a pretty girl, you get a nice anything, you go, how can I forget? How can I forget? Life is so good.
It's a daily practice, and it can sometimes be a moment-to-moment practice, right? Because it's very easy to lose sight of all this beauty and all this wonder and all this fabulousness, and to get caught up in the minutia of complaining and the things that are wrong, right?
It's very easy to take what's good for granted. That's what
Mm-hmm.
happens.
Mm-hmm.
That's what winds up happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I try not to take what's good for granted.
Mm-hmm.
But there's enough tragedy befalling people that I know that I tend not to take it for granted. I tend not to take it for granted. And I have this feeling in life that the things that were most important in life that I never thought I would get, I got them. It's not one day going to happen. I'm there already. I'm past that. I'm into the place where it's now like what color do I want? What? It's not. You know. It's great.
Okay, so we've been talking for like almost 2 hours. So, okay, so what's great now? Right today, you have a lot of projects about to drop. So what's on your plate right now?
Work-wise.
Yeah.
You'll excuse me.
All right, we have to look at the IMDb page because there's so many things.
Yeah.
But there's been Lady Dynamite and Fargo.
Well, if I want to really impress you, I'll look at somebody else's IMDb page.
No, you have a pretty good one yourself.
All right.
While you're looking, I'm seeing. Hi,
Great.
Nick. Nick is on here watching. Hi, Nick.
All
Hi,
right.
Sharon, Pamela, Phil,
Here are things that are
Snuffy, Shauna.
new that are coming up.
Yeah.
I have a couple of movies that I made that I'm excited for them to come out.
Okay, cool.
One of them is called Lying and Stealing,
Yeah.
which is a story about the art world in LA and a guy who's a thief, a kind of high-end thief, who steals very, very desirable pieces of art and tries to get out of that world. That's a particularly interesting movie to me because I play an unapologetic, sadistic villain in that. Something
You do play bad guys though.
I do, but this is not a Cy Abelman kind of bad guy. No, this is a straight-ahead, sadist, nasty bad guy
Okay.
who doesn't try and hide it.
Okay.
So that was unusual for me.
And that must be fun.
It was fun.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. And I have to.
Yeah. Look what else you got.
Well, I'm going to say. So that's also a very interesting cast. Emily Ratajkowski, Theo James. You know who they are?
No. Sorry.
That's okay. Emily Ratajkowski is a beautiful actress, or was a major model. You might, if I showed you her picture, you might recognize her.
Look her up on.
There she is.
Okay, so hold that up so they can see. Can you see?
Could you see that?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Not. All right.
Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so that's an interesting film that I enjoyed very much. Another one is called Silver Lake,
Okay.
which is also very, very interesting film. A good part that I enjoyed thoroughly. Stars Martin Starr. Do you know Martin Starr? He's on. Martin Starr is he was on Freaks and Geeks. Now he's on Silicon Valley.
I've heard Silicon Valley is brilliant and funny, and I've never seen an episode, and I've heard I have to binge it. So.
He's one of the stars of Silicon
Okay.
Valley. So that's a film about an artist, a writer, living in Silver Lake, who is going out with a woman who has children, and she wants to kind of get serious, and he's just afraid that tying himself down to a family is not going to support his artwork, and he needs this bohemian kind of lifestyle where he doesn't have responsibilities in order to pursue his art. And I play his mentor, who is a writer, a novelist, a Penn Award, famous novelist, kind of in the Norman Mailer bag, who is unapologetic about mistreating people, eats whatever he
Another
wants.
bad guy.
Well, he's not really bad. He's not really bad.
Okay.
But he sleeps with whoever he wants. He eats whatever he wants. He drinks whatever he wants. He puts down whoever he wants. He has this rather imperious attitude about himself. And I'm kind of a role model.
And that's a role model.
Well, he thinks.
Yeah.
But I sort of disabuse him of that. I tell him that I'm not really a role model, although he's thinking of me as somebody who's devoted himself to his art. So that's called Silver Lake.
That sounds fun.
That is a very interesting movie. I have another film that's not coming out for a long time called Hug Chicken Penny, which is with a filmmaker that I've worked with a bunch of times before called Craig Zahler. If you haven't seen Zahler's movies, look them up. They're fantastic. He made Bone Tomahawk with Kurt Russell, which I've been in all of his movies. This is the fourth one.
Oh, nice.
I won't name them all because I'll never remember them. But that's going to be out not for a long time, it'll be over a year. However, some television. There's a show that's going to be on Apple TV. It's a so far unnamed morning show about a morning show.
I was going to say about, because shows are all the time, doesn't matter. Yeah, there's no such thing as a morning show anymore, but yeah.
Right. Well, this is about a morning
Okay.
show along the lines of, Good Morning America or those type of shows. And what goes on, and there's I shouldn't say anything more other than that about it.
Okay.
But it stars Jennifer Aniston, Steve Carell, Reese Witherspoon.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, wonderful stars, and that's a really, really interesting project. I also have another show that will be on fairly soon called Black Monday, which is going to be on Showtime. This is also a new show. It has not yet been on. It stars Don Cheadle, Paul Schneer, Andrew Reynolds, Regina Hall. Really, really good show.
And what's your character in that?
I play the main character likes to do drugs on that show, although he's a big guy in the stock market. And when he does these drugs, he fantasizes me, and I tell him certain things. Sort of a spirit that haunts him.
Nice.
So there's that show, which is coming.
There's more?
Yes.
I can see you're having no trouble getting work.
Well,
Those days are gone.
listen, you never know.
This is quite a bounty you've got coming up here.
Then I have my own project, which
Okay.
I'm writing,
Okay.
and will be executive producing if it winds up getting bought, which I hope it does. Which is a fictional story, but largely based on a true story. It's called The Preservationist, and it's the story of a man who was very famous in the world of rare maps, particularly early maps of the Americas, very well known in that rarefied world. He made a lot of money selling and buying maps, and worked for rich people and institutions trading in these maps. And after about 20 years kind of at the top of this world, being expert in this field of maps, he was caught stealing from the Beinecke Library at Yale, which is the rare book library at Yale, and eventually admitted to having been the most prolific map thief of all time, stole many $1 million worth of maps. What's so interesting about him is he used most of the money to establish a kind of a colony of people that were kind of loser friends of his, for whom he could make life seem, as I said to you, a winnable proposition.
Wow.
He had this strange compulsion to be kind of a rescuer. And the money,
He's kind of like a Robin Hood.
well,
of sorts.
kind of, except that he didn't exactly take the money to give to the poor. It was to give to his friends, and a lot of it he kept, but to be an example to people that you could be successful. So that's something that I've been working on for a long, long time, and will make one of these days.
Wonderful. Well, Fred, you are a very you're a fascinating man, and you know a lot about a lot of things, and I appreciate your humility and your self-awareness, and the fact that you are continually striving to be that better man, which is very clear.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's amazing to me how much you and I, on this very brief acquaintance, have in common and understand about.
If I only had all that going on, but if I only had all that going on. No, it's been a sincere pleasure.
For me too.
Thank you. And we're gonna get Fred back. We're gonna get him to Women Who Write to actually read with this melodious voice something wonderful of his that he's written. And thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it. And Christina, thank you so much for being back there
Thank you, Christina.
and doing
I've been
everything.
sitting there for
doing
hours
it.
and hours.
Yeah, she's been
We
listening
go on and on.
to this whole thing, and all of you out there. We will see you next week with Teo Penglis. We're going to be in his home, and he has incredible art that we're going to walk around in. This is an unbelievable house we're in right now.
What do you have in this refrigerator?
No, we did. Christina, can you show them the art that's behind Fred there? And we'll see you next week on Game Changers. And
Bye, everybody.
Bye. You got it?